Okay, we're live. Um, I should maybe put in headphones. Let me go get headphones. I'm such a good YouTuber. Um, that's sarcasm. So yeah, it's funny. I've been just came up in PVK's homeroom today. So anytime this is what I'll start to do. Anytime I use uh language that isn't more broadly understood, I'll try to clarify what it is. How about that? PVK's homeroom means Paul Vanderklay, who is a friend. He's also somewhat of a YouTuber, online personality, although not really. And here we go. Speakers. Let me know if we're still good. Hap 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 New Year, Parsons. Hey. So when I say PVK homeroom, it means Paul Vanderklay, who's a Dutch Reformed minister in Sacramento, California, who, in my opinion, is at the center of the TLC, the little corner of the internet, which is this online emergent community phenomenon that also has local embodied physical body instantiations with conferences that's downstream of Jordan Peterson and the Meaning Crisis, and it includes John Vervaeke, who's a cognitive scientist from the University of Toronto, and Jonathan Peugeot, an Orthodox icon carver, and Paul Vanderklay, except, like someone said recently, Vervaeke is very about participation, Peugeot is very much about pattern, and Paul Vanderklay with the TLC has become very much about persons. And so Paul Vanderklay's homeroom is a typical, usually it's a commentary video that he puts out on whatever he's thinking about. And a lot of times he does daily. Sometimes he does multiple ones a day. He's been doing less lately, but his homeroom is like, PVK homeroom means PVK's main content, conversational catalyst that he puts out there about what he's thinking about. And then a lot of randos, such as myself, will maybe respond or riff off of or do our own version of a PVK homeroom. So PVK was talking about, what was the title of his video this morning? Is mystical Christianity the new personal relationship with Jesus? And it was connected to, I have not seen this video, but I saw it last night. It came up, Kalia texting me about John MacArthur. So Unheard had a conversation between Esme Partridge and Paul Kingsnorth, how the West fell for pseudo-religions. And Seabax, Christian Baxter, who's another one of the people who's emerged around PVK, Paul Vanderklay, who has a great channel called Truly Yours. That's your channel, Christian Baxter _YT. He did a video on meta-evangelicalism, which, who said this? My buddy, yeah, a good friend of mine from the TLC, who I don't keep up with that much more because I think they have a sweet baby girl, I believe. Yours truly, thank you. But I saw him pop up in the comments. He's also a poet, and he was just like, "This word is terrible. But poets know good words." So, whatever. It's still getting at something, and I think it kind of clicked for me what PVK is trying to get at today. So largely, I think what PVK is trying to get at, and I said this on Twitter in meta-evangelicalism. Let's pull up X here, and yeah, let's see what PVK said. Oh, because this is another conversation. I need to see this other conversation. It's not Unheard. This is like Pints with Aquinas, right? Let me see. Share screen. Here we go. So, can we see here? So this PVK, and he's saying metagelical, Puritan Orthodoxy, Protestants with icons in their homes and offices, saying the rosary, Orthodox and Protestants doing Exodus 90, which that's been happening for a while. Ladies leading the spread of sacramental traditions online. And it came up in the comments. I want to bring up a few comments, and I'm mainly going to talk about hell, because it's about hell. But it's connected to all this, is this conversation about hell. Well, first, okay, I'm jumping the gun. So this is a video I'll probably need to look at. It's Peugeot and whatever, the Pints from Aquinas guy. How Protestant converts will change Orthodoxy in America, Westernized Orthodoxy. So I said, I'm getting what you've been poking at. It's really a CW, shout out Weeks, religious pluralism thing. And the end of the protest, which means this is a phrase that Paul Vanderklay has said a lot of times, is like, he sees maybe it's time for the protest to end. Not necessarily Protestantism, but the protest as Protestantism as primarily a spirit that is set against. It's protesting. It's saying not that. Which is such an interesting thing, because eventually what that makes me think of is one of the great Rob Bell quotes that I love to say, which is when he talks to an atheist, he'll say, tell me about the God you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in it either. So or the great Michael Polanyi, one of my favorite quotes is, and this is from, just to give references so people can accept it into their identity and ideological paradigms, but it's a Tim Keller quote. Tim Keller quoted this in his book, The Reason for God. So that's a very Western, rational, apologetic, scholastic thing. The reason for God, reason-centric, first principles, the reason for God. But the Michael Polanyi quote in that book is, doubt and belief are ultimately equivalent. So doubt and belief are the same thing. I often say doubt is belief. Doubt and belief are ultimately equivalent. Doubt relies on a subterranean, so not in your conscious self-awareness. Doubt relies on a subterranean, under the ground, set of tacit, implied, not propositionally, consciously, articulately understood. So doubt relies on a subterranean set of tacit belief, non-propositional, non-self-aware, non-ideological belief in something else. So what is that? That is not that. It's belief in not that. That's what Polanyi is talking about. So that's what doubt is. Doubt is, I don't believe that. Now, does that mean that you're agnostic or an atheist? No, it just means you don't believe that. And then that makes me think of Dr. Nathan Jacobs and his series of videos that he did on reaching the nuns, like the NONES, meaning so it's not NUNS, nuns, Catholic nuns with habits. It's the nuns, the people who, when you poll people and you say, like, do you have religious beliefs or practice? And they'll say, we don't have none. I have none. And so that is the nuns, except that he found they still have a belief in something like karma or whatever. That's one of the questions that he would ask them that universally they would all say yes, is he said, do things happen for a reason? Is there purpose in reality? Or are things just arbitrary? Essentially saying, like, are you a nihilist? And people would say, no, I think things happen for a reason. That's a kind of, that's this romanticized belief they have. I mean, watch like a Hollywood romantic comedy. There's almost nothing. That would be like a true, and I don't think this is all postmodernism, but that would be like a true kind of nihilistic postmodern work of art, that like things don't happen for a reason at all. There's some book, I just saw a comment by Dave Williams, who's a Orthodox cat, who commented on PVK's homeroom video, but he's a longtime friend of the TLC, of mine. He's actually going to be, he's one of them who's setting up the kind of Southwestuary. I think it'll be like some sort of Asheville conference, but that's going to be very small. That's I don't know if that's public yet, but anyhow, he made some comment about shoot, why did I bring up Dave Williams? Okay, I forgot. Who cares? I'm totally off track. Let's get back. So, but part of this Christian, somebody said this in the comments. Tayo said Christian diaspora. It's yeah, I think that's very much that CW talks about the diaspora. You know, it's that the gospel or the spirit of Christ has gone out to the whole world, a lot of it via technology, a lot of it via empire, which are not things that I would promote, but nonetheless, uh, the word has gone out, and I mean that in a non-propositional way. And it's almost unavoidable that if you ask people who live in any part of the Western touched civilized world or the modernized technocracy that we live in of their values, I mean, there's going to be a lot of mammon in there. There's going to be a lot of money of wealth and sex and food. But one of the values will be the golden rule, treating others as you want to be treated. That'll be a really common feeling in all this. All right, let's go get into hell. So that's the context where I heard all this. But then PVK talked about me in the homeroom, and he brought me up because I am a convert to Orthodoxy. But then, that's this question of like, what is this going to be? What is this Westernized Orthodoxy going to be? Because America's Protestant. America is culturally Protestant. I said that in a comment. We can't really avoid that. There's some Catholic influence, because the original settlers and the spirit of the country and even the vast expanse of the West. Again, this is part of Dasein and English and the Western expansion. It's not arbitrary that, oh God, there's such a great Cormac. I want to talk so much about Cormac too. There's such a great Cormac quote from All the Pretty Horses, but he essentially says, like, I gotta find it. I know I've saved it, and I know it's in my favorites now because this is too good of a Cormac line to quote. And I need to have all this stuff just set up in my phone as or in StreamYard as branding, so I can just show people. But I'm flipping terrible at it. Sorry. And now my phone has an update, and I don't know how to find things. It's ridiculous. Okay. That's a good one. It's F. Scott Fitzgerald, but it's not right. Sorry, guys. I think this is relatively new, and I found it. I'm not going to be able to find it. Yes, I got it. Okay, I'm sorry. This is from All the Pretty Horses, but it's, so they said that a man leaves much when he leaves his own country. They said that it was no accident of circumstance, it's not arbitrary, that a man be born in a certain country and not some other. And they said that the weathers and the seasons that form a land also form the inner fortunes of men in their generations and are passed on to their children and are not so easily come by otherwise. In the same way that a tiger can't choose its stripes, I don't think that a person can choose their culture. I mean, in the modern world, you can put in some work, you can put in some effort, you can move across the world, you can change your landscapes because your language, your geography, your family, the people that are around you, the land, we are physically embodied. We are physical beings. This is part of the. This is why part of the reason I'm not a Gnostic. I don't think these are just mere meat vehicles that don't inform us. Stephen D20 has been talking about this really well. He said this in his conversation with Dumir toward the end, but he's just like, we didn't just grant the process of evolution. We didn't go through all this physical evolution and develop these bodies and all this stuff. We are so thoroughly embodied. We didn't do all this for thousands and millions of years just to throw it away, just to upload your mind into the consciousness and to get rid of the body. That's a kind of Gnosticism that is not what's going on. And so your Dasein, which is it's, I don't know, it's like your cultural essence, maybe. I don't think you can pick that. I don't think you can just change it to just be like, no, I'm going to become this. So, for example, myself, just to throw myself under the bus, a Western and then somebody brought this up too recently. Oh, it was it came up in a Mark Parker stream. I think it was maybe Holy Cow, but he said, shouldn't Western converts to Orthodoxy be under the see and the head of Rome, the Bishop of Rome? Well, that's all a very complicated conversation. I mean, technically, but should America should probably have its own see at some point, or North America, but these things take time. And so would that be under the auspices of Rome? Well, the church isn't even together. So like you can't say you should be under the see of Rome when the schism is still intact. We got to heal the schism first, and then that stuff would all get figured out. So but the main point is that Western converts to Orthodoxy are culturally Western, and they can't choose their stripes. There isn't the kind of romantic restorationist, backwards looking. We're just gonna, Christian Empire, and we're gonna we're gonna reinvigorate Byzantium. That's not how things work. If you're merely a restorationist, backwards looking person, you are I don't know. I just don't think that mode of being works. And I don't think that it's actually faithful to the tradition and the body of what the church is. Because if the church is a body, your body is a tradition. I've been thinking about tradition that way. Tradition is a body because it has boundaries. It's this and not that, but yet it's fluid and dynamic with its context, the text and the context, and the body and its environment. Like try to extract your physical body from its environment. It will die. It needs air, it needs food, it needs water. It has to have semi-permeable membranes. Stuff comes in, stuff goes out, in and out, in and out. That's how bodies work. And so a tradition is a body. If you have a completely static tradition and you're always backwards looking, then you're not going into the future and you're going to die. This is why I really love the term. I'm going to post it in here because I heard it. And I should find the video. I want to promote the video, actually. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need this anymore. But faithful innovation. A tradition is and should be, and a body is and should be a faithful innovation. Both of those things, because this is a reciprocity of opposites, right? It's a relational thing. Faithful to what has come before, and then also innovating to respond to what comes next. Because oh man, this is another great quote. I gotta find it though. Can I find my quotes fast? I can just try to do it from memory. If I had all these from memory, it would be better, wouldn't it? But okay, I'll try to remember it. It's Eric Hoff, I think, is the guy whose name it is. But it's just like the learners inherit the earth, while the learned, find them beautifully equipped to live in a world that no longer exists. Because guess what? The restorationists, the backwards looking, the world of the past, it doesn't exist. And so you're learned. You understand all that. You want to go back to this. Guess what? It doesn't exist. It's gone. So the learners, the people who are learning, or adverbial versus the adjectival. Like if you're just adjectively describing something from the past, you're dying. The future is coming. And faithful innovation holds both of those things together in a harmony. And that's how everything is. Your body is the same way. If you do not learn and navigate with your body to the changing environment, you will die. Survival of the fittest. You're going to die. Like, okay, for example, I take my body and I go out in the desert and I refuse to learn. And I say, listen, I'm from Minnesota and I need a coat and I don't care about this change in my environment. It's not right. You'll die. Or actually, the coat might help you in the desert. But you know what I mean? Okay, let's reverse it. Because it could shield you from the heat, depending on the coat. Let's say you go from the desert and you say, I don't need a coat. And you go up north, you'll die. You need a coat. Unless you're really Wim Hofing it and you're some sort of like guru saint. All right. Let's start talking about hell. I'm 20 minutes in and I haven't talked about hell. Welcome to my channel. This is what happens. When I talk about anything, I'm talking about everything because I think everything is connected. And so I see this and then I start riffing and I go over here and here and here. And if you can follow me, God bless you. If you can pick up what I'm putting down and see the connections, God bless you. And if not, just let it flow over you like a Terrence Malick film or like William Faulkner or something. And because if you try to understand what they're saying and what's going on here, and if you try to really figure it out in a left-brained way, you're gonna get stuck and you're gonna miss the flow and you'll drown. You'll drown in my wife said once that sometimes I can get in modes, and this is what my live streams are, and I can be this way conversationally, especially when I used to be more of an ideological, self-righteous in certain ways, younger person. That I could just, she says I have a way of talking without, like I can breathe, I can take breaths without ever stopping my speech. And it's also just like trying to drink water from a fire hose. Good luck. Hell is a Luke stream. Hell is a place on earth. No, what is that? Hell is other people? Is that, who said that? Which is not true. Hell is no other people. Hell is being utterly alone. Hell is having no relations. Hell is solitary confinement. Unending solitary confinement. Okay, so let's do a little hell prep. Okay, 21:45 in. We're gonna do some hell talk, and I'll open it up for a little bit of time, and then I have to go do yoga. Mark Parker, don't tell people. Yoga. It's it's bad. Is this bad? We'll see. Chinese farmer. The parable of the Chinese farmer. So PVK in the video. Let's connect it. I got to fulfill my title, Grim. That's a Grim Grizz who's from this corner. He always wants to he has to pay honor to his title. He feels like if he doesn't address the title of his stream, he's not doing his job. So that's what I'm referencing there. PVK brought me up in the homeroom and he said, one of the things that's going on, how did he say it? He said like, I should have timestamped it. He said that what's happening with Orthodoxy isn't so much like he was contrasting this. He said it's not so much just a mere conservative return. Some of the people coming to Orthodoxy isn't so much like a mere conservative return to just be like, I want stability. I want the stability of the arc. I want the stability of the tradition. I want to know that it's going to be here in the future. And it feels like everything's getting threadbare and like what's happening, nihilism, we're in this place of uncertainty, the meaning crisis. So then we go to something more stable, right? Orthodoxy or Catholicism or traditional religion, period, right? Because in times of chaos, people look for order. And so it's been described in this little corner of the internet that Orthodoxy, there's strengths and weaknesses, to be blessed is to be cursed as well, Clem Snide. There are strengths and weaknesses of everything. So Orthodoxy can be like an ark, like Noah's Ark, which is very stable, very big, but very slow moving, right? To move a big old giant ark with a little rudder takes a lot of time. And Protestantism or evangelicalism can look like a lot of speedboats, which like they're making turns all over. It's cool, it's hip, you got the wind in your hair, you may be like wearing some, a Speedo. But so there are strengths and weaknesses to that. You can quickly change to your environment in a speedboat, but yet if you have like maybe a tsunami or a worldwide flood, that boat's going to get flipped. And so you look for the stability of the ark. But someone like me converting to Orthodoxy, you look for the stability of the ark. Yeah, it's conservative, but like my priest likes to say, the Orthodox Church from the outside can look very structured and rigid and conservative, right? But then he says you have to always ask the question, this is always the thing with conservatism, is what are you conserving? And he said the church is conserving hospitality. Beautiful. That's very both things. It's non-dual. It's a convergence of opposites. You're conserving hospitality. When you welcome people into your house, hey babe, I'm live streaming, FYI. Good morning. Oh, shall we? Okay, so when you welcome people into your house, you need some boundaries. You have a house, you have a front door, you have doors, you have maybe a living room, you have like a dining room, you have kitchens, whatever. You welcome them in, you might have a foyer of which you greet people and welcome them, and then they come in and they come into your house. So you have boundaries, you have structure, you have a table, you have a kitchen. You have some structure with which you can welcome someone in. You have places for them to sit. So you need that kind of structure. You can't have no structure. Like even if you didn't have a house, let's say you're nomadic, let's say you're a plains, Native American Indian. You have teepees. You have a place where you set up things. You have a fire. You bring people into the warmth of your fire, the home, the hearth. You need that kind of structure in which to welcome someone to welcome the outsider. But then the person outside comes in. So you have to conserve your home, your fire. You have to carry the fire, which is an image that I very much love. My boy Gents, my local buddy Gents, we were talking about Cormac. That's another Cormac reference, carrying the fire from his book, The Road. It's also the very last scene in No Country for Old Men, the dream that the sheriff has that he's telling his wife about, the very end of Cormac, that I can't talk about that much because I will just start crying. But carrying the fire. Why? Because the fire is life. Home, hearth, fire. Cook food, warmth, fire. So you have to conserve that so that you can welcome in the outsider. It's a both end. Your body. You have to conserve your body. You have to do things with your body to conserve it, to protect it, to keep it intact so that you can welcome in what is not your body so that it can become your body. This is how reality works. And so that's the Orthodox Church. And so I came into the Orthodox Church for some of the security. I wanted a tradition, a living tradition that I could give to my children. Because before we were going to non-denominational evangelical churches. And the church that we were attending, I had no idea if it would exist in 10, 20 years. It still does exist right now so far. But then when if you give your kids the tradition, this was a question I asked myself, non-denominational evangelical Christianity. I'm like, what am I giving them? Like, what is that? Do I have confidence that that's going to give them something robust enough and conservative enough to last, to weather any potential storms that they may have? And I didn't feel like it was. And the other issue that was really an issue is I am personally inclined and constituted in such a way where I really enjoy and maybe need to have these kinds of conversations where I talk to people about what I think. And I'm an external processor, particularly in the areas of theology and philosophy. This is my hobby. This is what I do for fun. I like to talk to people about my thoughts, and I process things with others, and I see what I say and how they respond to that. I see what they think, and that's part of my contemplative meditative practice on in understanding. And I just, in my experience, was that I could not do that in the evangelical church, in the conservative evangelical church. I don't actually think you could do it in any of the evangelical church, because I think largely there are exceptions, but the exception proves the rule. Because in conservative evangelicalism, right? Conservative, but this isn't the kind of conservative I was just describing where you're conserving hospitality. The conservative is confessional in certain ways, right? Like we'd say non-affirming, you'd say abortion. A lot of them come down political lines, right? Perhaps male headship, female pastors, all those sorts of things. They want to conserve those doctrines which border on ideologies, right? And they want to conserve those, and they see that as essential and necessary for the continuance of their body, right? And this isn't a judgment. I'm just saying that's what most conservatives have. But then you have the progressive liberal churches, and they're on the opposite side. They want to be LGBTQ affirming. They want to be open to pro-choice. They want to be open to alternate lifestyles. They want to be open to I don't know, female pastors, the opposite, right? And both of those are fundamentally Protestant, right? They're protesting the other and something, and they want to conserve their views and their understanding. But then the question is either, I would argue that both of those ultimately are conservative in the hyper conservative in the sense that when push comes to shove, if an outsider, especially an ideological outsider from the other camp, either the conservative and the progressive or the progressive and the conservative, comes to their camp, I would argue that at some point, either the conservative or the progressive, depending on which camp you're in, needs to get on board with the doctrine, with the ideology, or else at some point they will become not welcome. But the spirit's the same. The action is the same. The adverbial, the way that they are being in the world is the same, although they'll put different labels on it. That's the essence of ideology. And one of my other favorite quotes is, "The last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree." The last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. That is ideological possession and unending schism around abstractions, which is what I call confessionalism. I think that started in the church, although that's a very complicated thing that usually bothers a lot of people and it would sidetrack us. So I still haven't started talking about hell, have I? So I came to the Orthodox Church with all that because I wanted stability. But here's also the thing. I'm not very conservative ideologically in this particular way, in that when I joined the Orthodox Church, I'm a Universalist. So this came up last night. Someone from my church, which they actually subscribe to the channel, they're a catechumen. So Eugene, if you see this, hey, buddy, if you've made it this far, I highly doubt you'd make it this far. You're probably watching this for the first time, just like, what is this? You're insane. Well, I really enjoyed you last night and your family, beautiful family. It was lovely. But I talked about hell last night and part of my journey, because it's part of my journey and my story. And I said, traditionally in the church broadly, as far as I know, there are three different views, doctrinal, ideological views, depending on how you come down on it, definitely doctrinal, of the doctrine of hell in the church. And they are eternal. And this came up in PVK's, Nate from Grail Country was making some of these comments, and I very much agree with him. And I was the first person to expose Paul Vanderklay to this term, but there's three views: eternal conscious torment, which is, and this is what came with Nate and Paul in the thing. I don't think eternal conscious torment is a polemical term. It's just a precise term. That term evolved at some point, I don't know where it was first used, to define a particular understanding of hell and how it works and what it is. All those words are important, except eternal is a little fuzzy. Eternal and conscious and torment. So like hell is conscious. The people that are there are conscious. They're aware. They're, in that sense, they're at least alive in a mind sense. Like, do they have bodies, whatever? There's nuance that tons of different people would have, but they are conscious. They are being consciously tormented. Torment, ongoing torment, it consciously. And then eternal, this is a word that fudges biblically very much, because eternal biblically does not mean an unending duration of time. Stephen D20, to reference my boy Stephen and what he's been doing, talking about theology and quantum mechanics and eurythmy and lots of different things. Hey Moo, will you get that thing? Just so that they don't knock. We're getting a delivery. I have many nicknames for my kids. That is not their real name. Their real name is not Moo, but I call them Moo. All of my kids have about 10 nicknames. Some more than others. If you can believe it. So eternal, though, biblically and traditionally, eternal does not mean an unending duration of time. No way. No. It doesn't mean that. Especially in the New Testament, I don't know Hebrew as much, but in the New Testament, it's aeons of aeons. That's aeons of aeons. So it's ages of ages, perhaps. What does ages of ages mean? I don't know. It's debatable. There's a conversation around that. But it definitely does not mean an unending duration of time. If you absolutize time, if you think time is eternal, if you equate those two things, you don't understand either. You don't even understand physics. Again, see Stephen D20 and what he's talking about over there. Because he would argue the quantum state is timeless. And then chaos is inserted into the quantum, and you fall into multiplicity from the quantum, I don't know, like, what would you say? Like dynamic monad of the quantum somehow or something? But time, you only have time with creation, with matter, with multiplicity. I mean, that's what time is. This is Einstein's theory of relativity. Those are probably our house shoes. Thanks, Vic. Okay, thanks. That's probably loud. Yeah, multiverse stuff. This is not this stuff. In one sense, it's complicated because you can get lost in all the jargon of quantum quantum language and physics and whatever, but this is not, it's not even, it is theological. Time is a theological philosophical conversation, but it's just science too. Again, go see Stephen D20, his channel. I think it's just at Stephen D20, right? I'll put it in here. So anyhow, that's eternal conscious torment. It's meaning eternal as an unending duration of linear time, which again, nobody knows if that's what happens. That is a certain experience that we have right now. Time is linear. You can think of this event and this event and this event. But guess what? Every time you think of those events, you're projecting with your imagination a remembrance of things that have occurred. Because that sequence of time, where does that exist? Well, it exists in your mind. Well, is your mind telling you real things? But where does that exist? It exists now, and it exists now, and it exists now. The past, like that delivery truck that just came, that past, does it exist past in time? Well, it doesn't. It actually doesn't exist anymore. It exists in my memory. What does that mean? There's so much projecting going on in this stuff. It drives me crazy. Okay, so that's eternal conscious torment. It's also known as infernalism. I would say infernalism is much more of the polemical term. Again, we're back to the three views of hell. The other view of hell is annihilationism. I was an annihilationist. I self-identified as being an annihilationist for a while. I don't know, 10 years or something like that. Oh, yay, thank you. I'm a big fan of house shoes. So as for me in my house, we don't wear shoes in our house, but we do wear house shoes. We don't wear outside shoes because, again, hospitality, inside, outside. This is no judgment. But wearing outside shoes inside, for me, that's messy. That's gross. Who needs that? But I have house shoes. Okay, here. Quick break. We'll get back to hell. I was going to say the second view, annihilationism. Keep all this in your mind. Eternal conscious torment, annihilationism. Now we're going to talk about fashion and shoes. These are some new shoes that I got. Look at these beautiful things. Look at that sheen. Look at that color. Look at that green. But it's also greenish brown. Look how when the light hits it different ways. Let's get it out of the light. What's that look like? It's kind of brown black, isn't it? But look, now it's green. And then you can see, look at I have green eyes. Green shoes. My daughter's saying I'm crazy. Yeah. Let me get back to hell. Calm down. These are my favorite house shoes. These are Birkenstocks. Believe it or not. Can you imagine that Luke Thompson would wear Birkenstocks? But I like these clog Birkenstocks because here's the thing. They're leather. So they're tough. They're durable. Look at the ends of my shoes. Look how beat up. These are old. I've had these resold because I'm a big fan of shoes that are high quality, that are leather, that last, that can be resold so you just don't throw them away. I hate fast fashion. It drives me nuts. It's actually not very environmentalist or creation care or whatever you want to call it. Don't, if you can avoid it, it's hard with like running shoes. Don't buy shoes that you're just going to throw away into a landfill. These are resolable. They're Birkenstocks. They're wonderful. No, Christian. No, naughty. Naughty. I love these. I don't know. I've resold them 5 or 6 times. There's a really great leather working shoe store. It's in Arden Hills, I believe. It's not in Minneapolis proper, but it's in Arden Hills. I like to go to George's. I love George's Shoe Repair. They do great leather work. I actually have another pair of my shoes that are there right now that I bought on eBay many years ago. They're a pair of Finn Comforts. Finn Comforts are excellent shoes. They're made in Germany. These are super cool. They're suede. They're green too. They're kind of like 80s vibey, but I had them there to go to get fixed because they're getting resold. They're really cool. Okay. No, this is not suburban monoculture hell. Number one, I don't live in the suburbs. Okay. I live in the city. So how dare you? But I agree with you of suburban monoculture hell. You just walked into heaven, my friend. Here's the thing. This is an orthodox understanding of hell. A quick aside to get us back on track. An aside from the aside to get us back on track. Welcome to the Taurus. Can I show you guys a picture of a Taurus? Let's do it. But I need an actual GIF. Okay, let's share. Share screen. I love this image is wonderful. So these are Tauruses, but can we get a GIF? See that? Can we see that? See how that works? It's like a cosmic donut is another way you think about it. I actually would love to talk to Stephen D20 about a Taurus and see if it relates to quantum mechanics and physics, because the center, right? It's like a black hole almost, or there's nothing. There's nothing at the center. What's in the middle of a donut? Donut hole. Do you like donut holes? What do you mean? You mean the middle that's taken out, or the hole? Does the hole exist, or is it just a falling off place? Jordan Peterson. Do holes exist, or is it a falling off place? Phenomenology, right? When animals, evolutionarily, biologically, Jordan Peterson talked about this with biological sight, when AI robotic sight, is he said, you don't actually see holes, you just see falling off places. You see potential actions. And how do you see that? With the imagination. The imagination, T-Grog. It's so scary. It's so scary. Don't fall out of your ideology of physicalism. It's scary down here in this hole. Okay, but I think the Taurus is a beautiful image of how things work. Okay, we'll come back. What was my aside for my aside? Shoes, aside, hell. Someone remind me. You can actually, Mark, not literally. You can't literally buy. If you could literally buy them, you'd like buy them in a book? I'm just kidding. Arthur M. Young. Okay, I'll try to remember. We'd say the imaginal. That's not what I was doing. Heaven, hell. Okay, heaven. We were talking about annihilationism. I was taking it aside. And yeah, let's go back to annihilationism. 3 views of hell. Eternal conscious torment. I already talked about it. Rewind if you want to hear about that. Or infernalism. Annihilationism is the view that... So here we go. Let's quote some Bible. For the wages of sin is death. Right. But the gift of God is eternal life through Christ Jesus our Lord, right? The wages of sin is death. Okay, what is death? Eternal conscious torment takes death to mean unending conscious torment. So it says death is actually unending conscious torment. That is death. So death is not the cessation of your body and your mind, or however that works, and whatever your understanding of eternal conscious torment is. It's actually the unending conscious awareness, torture of your body, either your conscious mental body, your intellectual body. Because like, what's being tortured? Is it your physical body? Is it like flames of hell? Or is it just your mind? So like, is it like eternal black? Is it like falling into the void of black isolationism forever? Is it solitary confinement forever? Like that's some kind of torment. So that's eternal conscious torment. But annihilationism just says the wages of sin is death. And what is death? It's capital punishment. You die. You cease to be. You no longer exist. Consciously or your physical body, you're just dead. You're gone. You do not exist. So when you came into being, out of the throne-ness, somehow you came into being, right? You can walk that through mechanistically as a physicalist, but somehow your consciousness came into being. The flip turned on at some point, right? And then you will just fall out of being. You will just no longer be. And like however that works, that's the simple version of what annihilationism is that you no longer exist. And it actually, I mean, the reason I became an annihilationist for 10 years is it has really good biblical arguments. If you are like a sola scriptura, biblicist kind of person, if you think the Bible, the word of God, right? Never mind all that logos stuff. And what does logos mean? And is logos a person? Like the texts, the words, the propositional written words is the word of God, and that's your authority. Which, can you root authority in a text? Again, that's a question. That's a Gutenberg 1.0 versus a body. Is a text a body? Well, does it have self-existence, or is it reliant on persons? Which is the body of Christ, I would say, in Christ. So I like to root authority in persons, not just texts. Because if you root it in a text, you're going to eventually root it in persons anyhow, because of which interpreter of the text. But exegetically, within that modality of your authority, if you want to go down that route and just grant it, annihilationism has lots of good arguments. And then the third view is universal reconciliation, or apokatastasis, or universalism. So it's like, for an Adam all die, so also the parallelism in Christ, all will be made alive. You know, that's that verse from Paul in Romans. And it's essentially the view that everything will be reconciled in Christ. So it's Christian in the sense that like all reconciliation comes through Christ. So that essentially one way that I would say it is that if you forgive others their sins, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you do not forgive other people their sins, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. Or the Lord's Prayer, Father, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Salvation is forgiveness. You forgive other people, and that is salvation. Then you don't receive salvation. That is salvation. Forgiving other people is salvation, because when you no longer have enemies and you forgive your enemies, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do, even if they're crucifying you. And you could say that actually or figuratively. If you truly forgive them, then you no longer have enemies. And then, this is the other thing I was going to say. Then the light of God's creation, because this is a very Orthodox perspective, is existence is being in the light of God's creation. That's what it means to be. And so, depending on your attunement, you can be positively attuned to the light of creation, and you can live into that light and be more and more highly attuned to it. A good way to view this is really C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce, because people come out of the dark world and they go up to the foothills of heaven, right? Somehow, and they are not attuned to it. The grass hurts their feet. You know, they don't. It doesn't feel like heaven to them, because they are not the kind of people to feel heavenly. And this is something we all know very intuitively. Like, right? Somebody can have everything in the world, right? Everything that they think will make them happy. You know, they can try to fulfill the lack with all these things that make them happy, and they can hate it, right? They can be like, this is hell. This sucks. I hate my life. I'm depressed. I want to kill myself. You know, like how many rich, successful people that have gotten all the things that they think they want, and they're depressed. So you can have the light of heaven. People are just familiar with that experience. So like essentially everything good could be happening to you and you could be in hell. Or there are people who like think Corrie ten Boom, or like Viktor Frankl, right, who went through the gulags and wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Or, you know, think about anyone that's suffering. You could be suffering immense torture, maybe, and you could be in like a heaven. I think of the image from Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life, right? When Franz Jägerstätter is in prison for refusing to join the axis of evil, the Nazis, and he's just like, I can't do it. I can't, my conscience won't allow me. I cannot go against. I cannot squelch the spirit of the implanted word, right? And then he's in prison, and his wife comes to visit him. The lawyer that he's given comes to visit him, and he's just like, okay, just listen, the war's almost over. Just say you'll join the army, sign the papers, whatever. You can be a medic. You don't even have to fight. Just do this, and you can be free. You can be out of prison. And Franz says, I am free. And then what Malick beautifully does with his cinematography, that image, that whole movie, it's one of the most Christian movies of all time. Silence is very good. Hidden Life is better. And it's more accessible than Tree of Life. I really love Tree of Life, but like, yes, exactly. You get it, Alan. You get it. I am free. Now, is he lying? Is this all some kind of illusion? Is that insanity? You existentially, this is true. I've had this experience. I can be in like the objective sense in a bad situation and be exceedingly happy, exceedingly joyful. What's the verse? Like, what's the Pauline verse? Suffering but always rejoicing, right? Like that's the thing. Like, forbid me not from living. Let me enter into the passion of my Lord. I believe it's Ignatius, right? When he says, like, don't stop me from going to my death. I want to follow Christ. I want to die for him. This is the martyrs they had, whatever, some people may call it a death cult. So that's the, but that is so the divine light is that we exist in the light of God. And attunement to that is salvation. And the Christian Universalist, okay, I'm going to open this up. And the Christian Universalist, I'm going to stop talking. I've almost talked for an hour by myself. This is ridiculous. So the Christian then would say that everyone eventually, or however that works, in or outside of time, I don't know how all that works, eventually becomes attuned to God. Because, and this is like what Rob Bell's book, Love Wins, is about. He just is basically asking those questions. Is like, in the end, in the final analysis, is God able to woo you? Does he know you better than you even know yourself? Is he able to overcome? Who knows you more, you or God? And he asks.
Woo. Is he able to woo yourself?
Right. You got it.
I get it. I want to go back to the shoes. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No. Everyone hated the shoes. Everyone hated.
No, they didn't. Did they in the
It
comments?
was off. Yeah, yes. They were like, "Wait, is there a skip button?"
Here's the thing: if you don't want me at my worst, at my fashion talk, you can't have me at my best, which is my hell talk.
Ooh,
okay.
Your hell talk.
If you don't want me at my bedhead, then you can't have me because I just always have bedheads. So,
Mr. Cool Man, I want you however you want to give yourself.
Whoa.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping the homoerotic undertones to a minimum.
Oh, and we're back.
Not on my Christian YouTube. All right. Yeah, you guys talk. I've talked for dang near an hour, and I'm sure none of it was intelligible to anyone, especially this guy.
Hell
David
is so
Busatil.
passe. Hell is so passe in the 21st century.
You think so? This is so like at that dinner I went to last night with a new catechumen and then someone else from my church. We just got into hell because it's my conversation. I brought up the little corner and everything else, and I'm just like, this is probably my topic. This is the thing I probably talk about more than, I talk about personalism and I talk about confessionalism, but like hell's it for me. That was my intellectual deconstruction. That's how this guy's here. The hell stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I obviously, I like universalism, but the thing is, I think that there is a kind of a role or there's something that process metaphysics does to the topic of universalism. So if I would give an analogy, if like we were fighting a war like in Okinawa, and we're fighting and like the bullets are going over our head and we're pinned down and it doesn't look good, and I say, hey, do you think we're going to win this thing? And you say, well, yeah, sure. And then we stop fighting, we're going to lose. So there's a way that for a phenomenon that's, or like, if I can get really weird here for a
That's good.
second and not elaborate further, like if there's genuine, let's say whatever has happened, it has to be determined in order to be what it is. There has to be necessitation and causation for whatever has happened up till now. But for now it's like it's free, it's open, there's genuine indeterminacy, but then it's like a superposition that once it collapses is seen in retrospect never to have been a superposition, but the now right now is still nonetheless a superposition. So there's this some kind of weird thing going on.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's a generativity that means that like while it's in process, we can only we hope for it, we repose it at the level of what's undefined, of like a potential infinite rather than an actual infinite.
Okay,
without going,
say that again one more time. What you just said.
We hope for the salvation of all rather than sort of define it at this propositional or static level. But it's no less a hope. Like love believes all things, love hopes all things. Like it's not just like wishful thinking or like I'm thinking it's like 5% probable, or it's not a
No,
probability.
because that's the wrong mode. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's a hope that comes from the heart. Like you believe in apokatastasis from the heart, not so much.
And that's why you can't be. No, I like that. That's helpful to me. That probably helped me understand why one ought not to be a colonialist and dogmatic about universalism, because that's where you're flipping the thing from the quantum to the thermodynamic and insisting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And that's one of the reasons why that I came to believe Catholicism is right, because in Catholicism you can be a universalist, but
Just
only
wait, mute
hopeful.
Mute him.
Hopeful universalism is the only version of universalism that you can hold as a Catholic. But when I kind of shifted into that, I came to see at the same time that like for metaphysical reasons, like if you really go all the way into like the dialectic and self-resolving paradoxes and stuff, the process metaphysics sort of make hopeful universalism the like necessarily the way that you talk about it.
Yeah. So I want to who'd we lose? Alan. Okay. I want to hear what Chad has to say, but I want to pull up.
He's just going to talk about Tile.
He will. Yeah. Or his girl, whatever. I want to talk about the tweet that was the whole impetus for this Thursday live stream that I'm going to do, which came from a Catholic cardinal, but it was pretty explicit about the old universalism stuff. Anyhow, Chad, I'm going to pull that up. Chad, what up?
Oh, hey. I was just thinking that Alan
Chad
could
is-
hang because this was like too much
Chad is
brain
frozen.
stuff for him.
He's not frozen for me, Christian. No. That's you again. This is you.
You're projecting, Christian. Yeah. Seabax is projecting. Also, I wanted to say that Cal has always the biggest hands ever. If you ever noticed that in all his videos, his hands are awesome. No, I like the. I think only because I don't think much about teleological matters often. The only time I ever kind of think about them is if I'm listening to some of these. But I feel like kind of part of the I say as a hopeful universalist, rather than one that declares that universalism is. But like the part of the hopeful universalism is that none of this is none of my business, in some sense, and that that I get the sense that we're called to try to serve, regardless of regardless of my opinions
Right.
about others and or myself, I guess. Because like I don't really, man, if I had to do the tallying on like whether or not I am going to heaven or something, I'm definitely they're not letting me in, man. And so, but what I can do here is hopefully try to serve in any way that I can, fit myself to serve, not because I'm a good guy or anything, but because that's what like I don't breathe because I'm a good guy, like I have to try to like that's what makes me feel most connected with my humanity, I guess. So I have no idea what we're talking about.
So,
Yeah.
Chad, what I would add to what you said, because I think it was good, is that essentially being overly doctrinaire or abstract about hell is, in one sense, is almost irrelevant because the point is to be holy. The point is to be a good person. Like no matter what you no matter what you think about hell,
Mhm.
you can be a good person.
But there is
However,
also, I
what I
think, a temptation in being underly doctrinal about things too, right? There's an appropriate,
sure.
I think. I try to think about like how Christ might approach any of us in these kind of matters. You know what I mean? Like he might just like you might just see that like a hopeful universalism in me might be something like an idol. So he might say something that crushes it that I still won't
Well,
agree with,
right.
right?
Well, and that's part of the thing is like Jesus also in Revelation says like, "Oh, that you were hot or cold, but you're lukewarm, and I'll spit you out of your mouth." It's just like I'm hopeful for universalism, and this is one of the things I want to talk to you with Jordan Daniel Wood is this is a pet peeve of mine. Is people will say you can't be explicit and dogmatic about universalism, but which of these conservative people in like the Catholic or Western churches is saying that about eternal conscious torment? They're perfectly fine with people being dogmatic about that. Well, screw that. I'm not like, no way. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, as far as the whole Catholic conversation of like in what ways can you and can you not affirm Catholicism, I'm very interested in what JDW has to say about that because he knows the tradition so well and he knows like the kind of the meta tradition around like how you can interpret and apply traditions so well that you can even like almost like affirm confident universalism within that. But for me as a kind of amateur theologian slash philosopher, the question that interests me is like basically first of all, if you say that something is going to happen for all eternity, so and so is damned for all eternity, does that really make any more sense than saying, for example, go find the last number of an infinite series and count to it? Or is there something sort of inherently contradictory about the notion of totalizing the infinite? So that means like whatever we think we mean by saying X is going to happen for all eternity, we don't really mean that because what we are saying or referring to with that is not a clear idea. Um, I think of also the near death experiences where people go to hell and they understood while they were there that it's forever. And when they come back, they say, hell is forever. I know because I was there. And they're seemingly totally unaware of the contradiction involved in their
Yeah.
having returned to tell the tale. But of course, it does suggest something qualitative rather than quantitative to the experience of eternity. Something like a now, where something is defined up to the horizon, but beyond the horizon, it is neither X nor not X. It's undetermined, and that means it's not defined to either continue or to stop. And theoretically, it's free to continue or to stop. But you find yourself in a kind of like sort of totally self-relativized moment where inside now there's no distinction between now and not now, and it
Right.
just keeps not stopping. And so you have this kind of like this more nuanced understanding of what does eternal torment mean, where it's something more in the nature of an indefinite process rather than for an all eternity process, because that just, let me put my big hands in there again, it's they're not really that big. I just put them close to the camera.
Look how big mine
It's
are.
yeah, there you go. See, that's the man with real hands. But the it's more like an indefinite process rather than a quote unquote for all eternity process. But even the notion of a truly kind of indefinite or infinite anything is a slippery and sort of self-negating concept if you really go
Yeah.
into it. And so what I would think is that the question for Catholics is not so much whether hell is eternal, but whether God in principle could end it. That is a question which I don't know that the magisterium has asked or answered.
Yeah,
And I
that's an
think that
interesting
would be
question.
so, because I affirm its eternity, but I also say that in principle God could end it. So here's the thing. Augustine said, Matthew 25:46, the goats go to eternal punishment and the sheep go to eternal life. And if it doesn't mean the same thing in both cases, how can we say that heaven is forever? Well, I would say that they're both indefinite, but one is the permissive will of God, something he only tolerates, and one is the positive will of God, which is something he desires as an end in itself. So God could, in theory, bring to an end even an eternal, i.e. indefinite process, if he wanted to, which he would want to, theoretically, with hell, because it's not life, it's not an end in itself. But heaven, he would not ever wish to bring it to an end. So to me, this other question of whether God in principle could stop it is a different question than whether it's eternal. And that's the question at which the magisterium, if I can even say that, in my opinion, that's where the Catholic conversation should go at a theological level.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. Absolutely. I think that's great. All right. Because here's the thing. If Jess comes back, he can keep this rolling. If he doesn't, we can't. So let's move on to Alan. And then Seabax has thoughts too. Seabax doesn't want to be shut down. Alan, you're muted. Or I can't hear you.
Beautiful
Can you
eyes.
hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
cool. Sorry. Who am I to stand in the way of the up-and-coming star, Christian Baxter of the corner,
God,
I would
he's
never...
so handsome.
What a good-looking guy. I heard he's never sinned in his life. That's part of his testimony.
Yeah, that's the main part of his testimony.
I've listened to every video he's ever done, and he's never sinned. That's
It's true.
I'm writing it down right now.
Actually.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a universalist. Sorry to step on the party. But I will say that I really dislike the arguments of like the Roger tweet that you or X that you had just shown.
Okay.
Of like, oh well, there, oh well, it sucks to be St. Paul. It's like, well, St. Paul is like seated like at the right hand of Jesus. It's like, that's insane to say that, like, there are fun party lives, and then there are like, if we're all universalists, let's just all do cocaine and go to nightclubs and have sex, and like
it's just it just evidences that he very much misunderstands at least my perspective. Like it's not a good steel man at all. It's a straw man. So yeah.
And it's just like,
and my argument is you're going to do those things anyways. So why do we care about this at all?
We'd like to talk about it.
My point on that, Chad, is kind of my point on the whole, that hell from my perspective culturally was used as a tool to deal with the existential. Obviously there's theological framings for it. There's theological there's scriptures referencing this, some idea about it, but that it was like, it goes back to this kind of disembodied faith of the last 40, 50 years of it. Well, and in different times, probably different parts of the magisterial branches of the church too, hell is kind of used as a cudgel in one way, but what you win them with is what you win them to, almost. It's like this ever existential fear of something that, that's a theological concept that we can't know, that's just related, that is related ultimately to faith or belief. But we can know about the hell that exists apart from like the journey of theosis or the journey of sanctification. Like there are hells that we experience in this life that I think you know, when Christ is talking about Gehenna, like he's using a real thing that's in a real part of reality, and instead of it being this existential tool, and I think that, I mean, I could be wrong, Luke, but for myself, like my aversion towards you know, like spending time thinking about the eternal conscious torment of hell in the kind of heaven's gates, hell's flames, you know, culture that I grew up in, was, you know, the question of door-to-door witnessing. The first question that you ask is, if you were to die tonight, would you spend eternity in heaven or hell? And so to me, that is the reaction. Like that's the, and when you're saying, Luke, your response to it is almost a cultural response that if these guys are evangelizing with eternal conscious torment, then like I'm going to speak to that from and within a certain culture to give credence and voice to something else. So I see it as kind of like a cultural existential tool that sometimes is missing the point of like the whatever the non-eternal conscious torment that we experience every day, that we then bypass using these theological terms to not deal with the hells of addiction and the hells of you know, betrayal and the hells of you know, all the Dante hells.
Well, two responses to that is, one, I want to play this Matrix clip because I love it and it applies. But then also I would say, what your whole thing just made me think of is all models are false, some are useful. I think that's very true. It's very right brain, left brain stuff. Whatever your model of hell and heaven is, it's not right. I mean, it's just not. But some are maybe useful. And to your point about me is that I definitely believe that I am not a fan of infernalism or eternal conscious torment. I think it has lots of problems. Like Matt C said, like, are we just doing it because we think that it's not going to get people where they need to go, right? Some models are false, but they're not useful. It's not useful to getting you where you need to go. Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of people. Jess, you can just add yourself whenever you want, if you want.
I would.
But then the other thing, let me play this clip because this is very true, and then I'll let other people talk, and then maybe Jess will take over. Here we go. Tell me if this works.
Do you believe it now, Trinity?
Morpheus. The Oracle. She told me.
She told you exactly what you needed to hear. That's
all. Eternal.
You know, sooner or later you're going to realize, just as I did, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path.
Oh, what? What?
So that's, I mean, are your doctrines, your models about hell just a means to get you there? Because I think that's true. Like, I think there's probably people who need to hear some sort of infernalism, at least in an infant stage. This is what I would say. To the fear of the negative will push them toward the positive. But then, like John Piper has said, if all hell is eternal fire insurance, does that mean you love Jesus? No, then Jesus just becomes a transaction.
That's right. There's a problem if you're fearing fear more than you're loving love or loving what's good, right? And so, because it ultimately can't work. And there's a problem where if hell is, let's say, the most ultimate sentence that's pronounced on a creature, then it seems to make the exclusion sort of the exclusionary dimension of the ultimate reality be more fundamental than the inclusive axis or dimension, and that from a deep philosophical level, that just doesn't seem to work, because the ultimate reality has to have like a kind of, like, the essence of reality is unity, and so the ultimate reality has to sort of have this kind of deep unitive principle to it. But I mean, talking about false but useful models, you know, in Catholicism, they say that you can know that some people have gone to heaven, but you can't know that anyone has gone to hell. So in my view, like, hell again it's infinite. I mean, it's indefinite. We think we mean something when we say it lasts for all eternity, but I would really suggest that doesn't make any more sense than talking about finding the last number of an infinite series and counting to it. We think we mean something when we say that, but all we really can mean is something that's indefinite. Because whenever you've taken all of something, that something that you took all of is seen in retrospect to be finite. So what I'm saying is that hell is hell while you're in it. When you're in that indefinite suspension, it is hell while you're in it. When it ends, if it ends, you will see in retrospect that what you were in was never hell. We would say it was perhaps a kind of purgatory that one had entered unknowingly, which is what we must say for every near-death experiencer who has gone to hell and seen that it is forever and ever and ever, and yet somehow returns to tell the tale. That's kind of my way of seeing it, and it's invoking process metaphysics. But the problem with the process metaphysics, sort of like Hegelian dialectical stuff, is like it's all what you would call, with the maximum of charity, you would call it self-resolving paradoxes. But another way to describe it is that statically it's a contradiction. The only way it works is a kind of dynamic process.
So like life, my experience of life is eternal, and like I know that's not very profound or anything, but like my experience of living is eternal up to this point. Obviously I don't know what death. I know that other people have ceased to live, so I know I have a sense that life will come to an end, but I don't know. I'm,
I feel like my experience of the present is eternal. You know what I mean? I feel like it must be in the same nature as the eternity, like the true eternity, which is in some weird way it's more, only God and eternity like sort of share the same ultimate meaning, because anything like the Catholic theology, they talked about eternity, the idea that the eternity of the saints is still time-like, and it's a lesser kind of eternity. Like the eternity of eternities, it's like it's not distinguishable from God, at least conceptually. But ultimately, I think even the present moment, it has to share in the same nature as that ultimate eternity and the ultimate reality. But as far as like when I remember the past, it's not the same as like the present moment in which I am remembering the past.
and which past, right? I mean, there are many different. It's interesting because there can be hellish pasts that can be transformed or transfigured into a new light, and I could see them in a different way and have a kind of like, I like this idea of hope for a better different that I
Yeah,
couldn't have foreseen. But then there's past that are joyful also, that um that that those two can kind of fade and fade into a nothingness too, like where. So yeah, I don't know. I think we're getting way the hell out there, bro. That we're, but I'll tell you
Have you
what, I have experienced hell. I mean, hell is in the same way that that now that life is seemingly eternal, right? The hells that I've walked in, um, those two did feel very eternal, and um, and and only grace could pull me out of those. And I think the ultimate hell, if I had to like try to construct the ultimate hell as like from a fictional point, it would be something like me sitting in eternity, um, trying to banish myself while being cradled by Christ, and being and like until until um until I can no longer, kind of like when a child is having a temper tantrum and they just kind of like temper their tantrum their way into a nap, and they're just kind of too tired to fight. That's what I feel like hell would be like. So I got to get out of this. Is getting way too weird for me, guys.
well, no, I agree with that. Like we've been talking about hell as like a power tool or something to scare people, but I think it's real, and I think it's probably even extra real, sort of after this life is over. Sorry if my son's foot is on my shoulder. It's really existentially true. It's describing our experience, and how I would think of it is like the experience of constantly. It's like your ideal is what it is, and you do identify with your ideal, but at the same time, you're also realizing you've fallen infinitely short of your ideal, and it's like this kind of constant like negation. It's almost like a existence of non-existence, and like you're constantly missing a step. It's like there's some fundamental process of self-identification with one's ideal that is always going on, but in this case, it's like maximally discordant. And like I got in a kind of I hope friendly discussion with a friend recently, and he was talking about how it's unfair that God has given us the power to sort of misuse our freedom in a way that we can suffer sort of indefinite conscious torment, and when God himself is in danger of no such thing ever happening to him. But it's because God is always sort of, he is, in a sense, so to speak, always living up to his own ideal. It's always a true self-identification with his ideal that is happening. That's why he is who he is. And like the son is like the perfect reflection of the father, and all that. But hell is a very real experience for us like finite creatures, and I don't think it's less real when we die. I think if anything, it's probably more. But I've never been there. But I
Another
just
good
listened to
hell
lots
before
of.
I go. Another good hell is going to be nothing but apple pie and Caucasian people. That's just basically what hell is going to be, and I'm going to have to deal with all of that for the rest of eternity. Is freaking apple pie and Caucasians, just the absolute worst sons of bitches that I ever heard of in my life. I got to get out of here.
I was thinking the hell starts like heaven and hell start today, every day, and that's kind of the and that one without like a acknowledgement of truth or alignment with truth or realignment with truth, you're in hell. You're in that negated space. You're in that repeated pattern of existence, and it can spiral. It can just keep spiraling, and it can spiral all the way into death. And along the way, it can destroy things. And to me, that's why. I mean, there is always this idea in the neo-evangelical, metagelical, evangelical realities that we've lived in, Paul Vanderklay, that these that okay, the good life with Christ is after the belief that he saves you from sin so you can get to heaven. But there is also a good life. But it's that you're saved, and then also that you're you're doing good things. But there seems to be like this another kind of conscious torment of not living up to the ideal, in a way that whenever there isn't a way of continually figuring out what it means to be, for grace to be extended to yourself, and without it being some kind of license to just continue in the pattern. And so those are all things about hell, heaven, now, eternal, that I think are hard to work out, and that things maybe like for I don't know if I've ever met you, so I don't know your name exact. Are you Kale? Not cool.
Well, I am Cal, but I
Cal.
think there's more than one Cal in the space.
Okay,
I'm
so
Cal
you're cool.
Rivet.
You're cool, Cal. That cool
Thank you.
Cal has you find in these very thought out and embodied, explicit frameworks, things like Catholicism, help place those pieces, rationally through a theological framework that has a lot of embodied and metaphysical structures in place to place those things.
Well,
Anyways, That's my rant.
Yeah, well, there's always like there's an X, there's a not X, there's logic that it works by taking predicates or descriptions and then setting them against their negation or their complement. But logic itself is sort of defining itself implicitly against like illogic or contradiction. And there's a way that like the X and the not X, there's like a tension between them, and truth, it basically lives in this tension. And when you kind of articulate it sort of, it actually gets away from you, where deeper truth becomes manifest. But so I'm not claiming that what I'm saying is like the final description. It is more of a, ultimately it can only be a more personal way of making sense of things. But at the same time, I think it kind of, there's also a way that is resonating with something outside me. What I was going to say was, when you're talking about choosing ideals, I think about that a lot, because I happen to think that hell is a self-judgment. So when we choose, but the thing, yes, it's like, but is it God's justice? Well, God's justice is that we should be judged by whatever we call God. God is love, so God is merciful. But if we're in a courtroom and the judge wants to commute our sentence, but we're so busy talking and yapping and disrespecting the judge that we can't even hear him, we're not even acknowledging him as a judge, so he can't even commute our sentence, so to speak. This is like an analogy. If we call some other God, is like, so God won't pronounce us innocent unless we call him God. If we call some other God, we will see whether we can, whether in the end that accords with our sort of deepest idea of what the infinite, slash God is, or whether it doesn't. And I think that the sort of the eternity of the experience of hell is corresponding to the infinite disparity or non-equivalence between the real God that we do kind of always sense in our heart of hearts, and the false God that we've chosen as an approximation of God, which, even though in the moment, because sin blinds us to the future and to consequences, even though in the moment it looked like a passable copy or close replica of the real thing, like in eternity, when you see all the implications of your premises and all the consequences, you see that it's infinitely non-resembling the real thing. And so again, like, that's something about the eternity of the experience of hell is matching that what philosophers would call like the infinity of that modal disjunction, the infinity of the difference between the infinite and the finite. And but yeah, so it's about choosing your ideals, and the weird thing is how in the present moment the ideal that's really true will feel like death, and the ideal that is not true will really feel like life. Like the dissociation is that profound. But that's, I guess, why Jesus said that whoever loses his life will find it, and whoever finds his life will lose it.
I kind of wonder what you guys think about this. I have a friend. We don't talk too much anymore. We used to work together, and we're good friends. But in one of our last conversations we had, he left Christianity, started experimenting with all kinds of things philosophically and religiously. Ended up getting into some dissociative drugs, and I don't know if you guys know what dissociative drugs do.
Ketamine.
Yeah, ketamine. I forget, he wasn't doing that one. He was doing some other one. But he said he found himself basically in this space where he was completely alone and isolated. And like, even when he was talking to me about it, it had this sort of dreamlike quality. It's the only place that I've ever experienced that is in some sort of dream where you're like completely cut off from everything. Like it has this sort of eerie, this uncanny, eerie feeling to it. But you know, when I picture what Cal was talking about, the relationship between the infinite and the finite, there is this sort of thing that takes place, and it's been talked about here before, but the idea that the infinite has to create a space for the finite to exist. Otherwise, the finite is just another part of the infinite, and like it's undifferentiated, basically. How do you differentiate the finite from the infinite? Well, the infinite has to like contract, make a space in order to that the finite may be something other than just a part of the infinite. And so there's this weird dance, because like, where does the finite come? The finite comes from the infinite, but so it doesn't have anything itself. But so what gives it itself is the infinite's relationship to it. And so this is, I think it really is a Trinitarian picture of the relationship between the Father and the Son, that the Father begets the Son. And, you know, this is maybe one aspect of it. At least that's how I think about it. And so there's this space where the Son is created, but that also has this problem of when you're finite, there's this sort of isolation that happens. And I think we see this when Christ says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And sort of the answer is that so you could be something, you know, other than, so you can have being. The being is gifted to you, but it's like also this sort of cost that the finite has to bear. And anyway, if any of that makes sense, like I think hell is like pushing further and further into the finite aspect of our being, and not quote unquote like returning to the Father, so to speak, in a relational, reciprocal dance is what I'll say it, because the Father gifts your being back to you, and that's what we don't trust him, because if we give ourselves to him, like we're out of control fundamentally. We don't have control over ourselves. You know, like even the prodigal son, he goes, I'll go be, my Father will make me a servant. At least I could do that. You know, he didn't, you know, I guess he knew his father good enough to know that his father wouldn't kill him, because his father could have with what he did. But I think this is kind of what happens in death. Death is us losing ourselves to God, so to speak, and we have to trust him that he will be true to who he says he is, or who he's revealed himself to be, which is the God of resurrection. I don't know if any of that's, but
yeah, no. So what do you say about?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. If you wanted to finish your thought, or if anyone else
I was
wanted
just
to
going to
jump in.
reiterate stuff. So please go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, with scripture like to live you must die, you know, well then there must be a heaven on the other side. But that reference is not taken as the end of physical life. Like it's the end of a part of your life that you're living, you know, and that you just mentioned like a resurrection. And and so was there after that death, like that death that happens in life, is there a heaven or a hell on the other side of that? You know, that's not. And I again, like one of my biggest, if to get on here and talk about hell, my biggest beef with hell is kind of my beef with dispensationalism, which is that it and even with like, you know, mansions and streets.
What
of
is
gold,
dispensationalism?
well, it's a framework for how the world's gonna end and the Antichrist is going to come and then God comes back. You know, there's obviously like pre and post millennial and amillennial and all that kind of stuff, but the dispensationalism is like a hyper rational look at scripture where you can like read the newspaper and then you can apply this prophecy.
Right.
And then it's like, or you can see who's elected. You can apply that prophecy to them. You can look at geopolitics and apply that prophecy. And you've got like a read on these. And in Revelation, it talks about like 7 dispensations before the end. And so what I mean by like with that, and even consciously looking to heaven and hell because maybe your life sucks. And it's like, so I want to think about, you know, a mansion in glory, like in the 1930s. I would rather think about a mansion in glory than my shack with a dust floor, you know, like,
yeah.
And so it's an escapism from the real. And also the same thing with dispensationalism is like an escapism into like I've got the secret knowledge and I'm constantly, you know, scanning the InfoWars interwebs for how this is all going to play out. And I know because I've got and all that takes away from life, from living, and from, you know, something like, what does it mean for your kingdom come, your will be done here on earth as it is in heaven? Like, what does that mean if you're constantly only thinking about, well, what's it like as in heaven, you know, and how's this all going to go down? And instead of my daily bread, and I think that there's more heaven in that, you know, embodied reality, and so these theological constructs that we receive that then get like culturally, mimetically spread in our ideas and in the preaching and stuff about specifically like heaven and hell and dispensationalism in the way that the frameworks that I was exposed to them growing up. I keep coming back to saying it. I think it creates a really nicely packaged Gnosticism that takes you away and makes you actually hate the world. And so, anyways, that's my
opinion. What's strange about all that dispensationalist stuff is like it was just mentioned a second ago, like you fear that more than you fear God.
Yes.
And like Luke was saying, like maybe there's a useful purpose to that. Just like there's this story I always kind of remember about the
useful purpose is it made Timothy LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins a lot of money with the Left Behind series.
Sure.
They were able to finance The Chosen with, apparently.
Oh, really?
Well, that's me making conjecture based off finding out that Dallas Jenkins is the son of the author of the Left Behind.
You'd think his dad would throw him some money during the crowdfunding.
So, yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, but there was a father and he had like a few boys and his one boy was just like completely out of control, like very disrespectful, hitting his mom, like throwing things, breaking stuff. And like he got to the point where he kind of just realized he could do whatever he wanted. And like he didn't care about punishments, like timeout, being grounded, you know, having to sit at the dinner table and finish he didn't care anymore. And so the dad was like, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to take you to, you know, he's still little though. Like he's doing like he's 4, 5 or 6 or something like that. And he goes, if you don't stop it, I'm going to take you to where all the naughty kids go. And the and the kid's like, you know, a little bit like weirded out that his dad would say this, but kept disobeying. And finally his dad, like in a, you know, controlled but burst of anger, like grabs him, throws him in the car, and is like, all right, we're going. And he's like, where are we going? And he's like, where the naughty kids go. And he goes over to like the abandoned warehouse side of town. It's like just dark. There's no street lights. There's nothing. There's no homes. And he pulls up to a corner and, you know, it's dark out. I picture it raining or whatever. And he just turns to his son. And he says, get out. And of course, like, you know, the kid breaks, you know, is like crying and the dad like plays it up for a bit. He's like, no, get out now. And the kid like slowly opens the door. He's like, no, please, I promise. He's like, get out. This is where the naughty kids go. And like, finally, like he was like, okay, fine, close the door, get in. And like had a talk to him. But then like the kid behaved like after that. Like wasn't, you know, he's still rambunctious.
I have to try to get in on this, because what I hear in this is like something that's resonating with what you said earlier. Like what I'm hearing is when he takes this kid to this place, it is like the absolute and final negation of the kid's like ideal / his own identity. Because for whatever reason, we find our own identity in our ideal. And then like what you were saying in the beginning about this thing about God, he's infinite, so he has to make a space almost for like the finite to be. Like, you know, like that's what they say in Kabbalah. And I mean, it makes sense to a point, but the weird thing is like, if the infinite is not finite, then it is finite, because it's under a limitation of not being finite. So it's like this weird thing like that. Every time you try to reason around it, it's slippery like a bar of soap. So it just gets away from you. But like there's an idea to me that it's like, if one has an ideal that can be negated, it is not God. And there's something about love where it can't be negated, like where Paul said that he, because God is love, is I'm tripping all over myself, but I'll say a few more things, because what you were saying about like there being this logic that we can do with the infinite, it also makes sense to me, because like if you say there are some things more like God and some things less like God, that's like saying God has a finitude. It's like saying that God is under a constraint such that some things resemble him more, and some things resemble him less. It's implicitly also to make God finite. So there's a weird way that we always have to do that. And you know, even if we're saying that God is love, and I guess what I would say is that you know, obviously it's some kind of relationship in which the terms are always redefined. But it is a relationship between the finite and the infinite, with then some like kind of new emergent infinite that's sort of emerging, you know, beneath the distinction between those two sort of initial categories. But something about love, it's like it can't be negated, where like Paul wished himself accursed. He would wish himself to be in hell for the sake of his brethren. And it's like hell can't hold you if you're, it's almost like the Bodhisattva, doesn't, he forgoes enlightenment in order to rescue every other trapped or conditioned soul first. But in doing that, it's like he finds true liberation, because true liberation is in that kind of compassionate and selfless identification with all those others. I feel like that's like the true sort of identification with the infinite consists in like the selflessness of love, which is like, it's self-sacrificing by its nature.
Yeah, I mean, you get this weird thing that the infinite is defined sort of, it ends up being defined by its relationship with the finite. And even, you know, if like conceptually, this is always how I think, or this is how I think about it now. But if the infinite creates a space, that space has edges to it, and there's a finiteness to the infinite now. You know, there's a, and then for the finite to be. But I think this is why it said that when we've seen Christ, we've seen the Father's, because Christ is pierced for us, and the infinite was pierced so the finite could be, and it's something like that. Because I think about also in Genesis 1, when it talks about the separation of the waters, the separation of the higher waters and the lower waters, that God doesn't say that's good on that day. He says it's good every other day, but on that day it just says that the waters were separated. And it's like there was this, that's the sacrifice the infinite makes. And then it's reflected to us in Christ who basically the finite makes the same move as well, and that's how the infinite and the finite are the same, something like that.
That's where the when Luke was referencing like Stephen D20's like relation, trying to relate the quantum and in space-time thermodynamics, like as the infinite and the finite. It's like when Christ, if Christ contained the infinite within the finite or something like that, and then he was pierced, and then his the quantum flowed out of him,
Right.
like that, then we can receive in relationship.
Yeah, but even when it says when he was pierced, it was a flow of blood and water, like something like that's birth. There's a flow of blood and water. So like I think the imagery is just there in the text. What there's something born into the world, and that in like whenever something's born, that infinite possibilities cascade out from it.
And it's this I guess it's kind of, I'm hearing like the cyclical of like the infinite creates the finite, and then out of the finite the infinite is created, like this of infinite possibility is then created again or something like that.
Yeah, and I think like in the Celtic symbol of the Trinity, it's those three intertwined like the
Triad,
making like triangles. Like I think it's that flowing dynamic pattern between the infinite and the finite. So like we're talking a lot about the Father and the Son, but what bridges the gap is the Holy Spirit. And that relationship between the Father and the Son is so real that it actually takes on its own personhood. That's one way I've heard it described. But anyway, like all of that is dynamic and flowing, and like when the Son gives himself up to the Father, to you I give my spirit, and like you can kind of think of it as the finite going back into the infinite. That's the sacrifice the Holy Spirit makes, because now the Holy Spirit is gone, and so they're all making mutual sacrifices in mutual space in order. And then again, the Son is begotten, and that's the story of resurrection. And then again, the Holy Spirit comes, and something like that. Like I kind of have that picture in my mind whenever I'm thinking about that. But
yeah, I feel like
one thing to like push on that, hell would be over identifying with the finite, and over identification. This would be like
over identifying with yourself. And your existence is this constant relationship between you and God, and it's like the finite in that is you.
It's the wrong
that's just one way to see it.
Part of yourself is your relationship to God, and that's actually,
right.
in
Job, right.
Job actually comes to the conclusion, like in Sheol, God could remember him, and so like there's this land of non-existence that you sort of vanish into. But he says, if I'm righteous and God created me, formed me with his hands, there's a chance he could remember me. And so he actually posits this other place, which is the memory of God, which God could call from, and then out of Sheol he would come. So like there's this so you have on the opposite ends, you have, let's say, hell, and then you have the memory of God. And the thing is you got to know that God could call from his memory and then pull you out, so to speak, or at least call you forward again. It's
sort of a resurrection according to this truer idea that God has of you. And what I'm saying about like this kind of dynamic between the infinite and the finite, there are many ways to describe it, but none can like define it. It's something you can only sort of illustrate rather than demonstrate almost. But what I was going to say was, like when you were talking about like how like the relationship between you and God, like I had a thought about like how there's a certain way that you find your identity you can't just say it's me over here and God over there, and then there's the relationship, because somehow your identity is like in the relationship. So like the way I think of it is like this, like in love, because what I keep talking about, like identity, your identity being in your ideal. Like if two people each sort of see each other as their own ideal, which is like ultimately like they're seeing them as like the ultimate like combination of attributes that overcomes a limit. Like you're the ultimate both X and not X for me. Like you're like my highest image of God almost, or of the infinite. And both people are seeing each other like that, then hold on. Then it's like when you put two mirrors in front of each other and they're each reflecting each other. And when you do that, the question is, what is the image that's being reflected? Because it's not either one image or the other, but it's each image is so infinitely interdefined on the other that you can't really say where one begins or one ends. And it's like that's like a truly kind of like infinite and recursive process, like this kind of mutual reflection that happens in love. And like that's like I feel like this is like the dynamics of the infinite are in that.
Right. And something like creation emerges out of that, or something like.
Yeah, because really I can't. It's almost like God can't find his. It's like I can't find my identity separate from God, and maybe also God, because He created me, now He can't find His identity separate from me.
Well, you get
even
that
if in the beginning,
two waters, the waters above and waters below. Water's a mirror.
Yeah. And what you do when you sort of affirm someone, when you love someone, is you affirm their identity. To affirm is to like to mirror or imitate or echo at the most primitive level. And so like when I see, like if my son is obsessed with dinosaurs, then I affirm his identity by sort of like becoming dinosaurs in his presence. Not really, but I bring out dinosaurs. If he's singing about dinosaurs, I'm singing the same song as he is, right? And so like there's a way that God is infinite, and He's able to see all of us as if we're the only person who exists, like simultaneously, because He's not subject to space and time or limitations of attention or resources. And He is always sort of like mirroring back to us like our own truest and highest ideal, like, and that's like sort of the way in which our existence is like unfolding. He is always sort of in a sense mirroring us back to us, because there's also the way that your highest ideal, like I said, you sort of you posit your own identity in that, and your highest ideal is also sort of filtered by the limitations of yourself. Sorry if my son is, I know my son is trying to get my attention, but I'm trying to finish this point. For like John Calvin said, that knowledge of God begins in knowledge of the self. So there's a way that for you, all your knowledge of God is sort of filtered through you, and from your perspective, the qualifier from your perspective is meaningless. It adds nothing, because you're inescapably in your own perspective. And so like for like in the now, there's no distinction between now and not now. For you, there's no distinction between for you and like, you know, this impersonal or transcendent perspective. So what I'm saying is, like, when God is giving back our ideal or reflecting it back to us, there's also a way that He's like, I don't know. It's like He's revealing Himself, but He's also revealing us to us. It's just some weird. He's affirming us. I always get tripped up when I try to talk about it. I get lost in the Droste effect, where you face two mirrors against each other. But He is affirming us. He is mirroring us back to us as part of loving us. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like, it is that law of attraction thing where like we get what is in our heart almost, or we get what we expect. It's like we get our own ideal, but also like with a twist, because we don't really fully understand.
We'll receive what we didn't expect or we didn't have. Because that's like what it, because like if it's totally recursive on ourself, that's how you can get caught in this infinite self loop. But then it's, 6 is like the complete system, and then 7 is the remainder, and the 7 always interrupts that in order so that something new could take place. And
yeah, that's right. That's right. Because if like you keep identifying with your known self, like, and you make your highest ideal like that part of yourself that you think you understand, like that's when you would get caught in that.
yeah, you can.
That's
People do.
yeah, and it's a thing where it only when for you it is experienced as infinite until it comes to an end. Like that kind of recursive loop until you hit like that like ultimate bedrock. But if that's how you experience it, then for you there's no distinction between the reality as you experience it and like the reality, because it's like you're always you theoretically. As long as we're doing logic.
According to this comment, we've already encountered a
Oh, okay, good. Well, that's fine. That's I think that every time that I would get into a conversation, I'll start out with something more normal, and then I'll always push it to the level where it
me
can't.
too. I'll always go out to the abstract, and then hopefully people
For real.
will help me out. Like you got to like, you start by the road, and then you walk out in the field, and you slowly make your way to the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
And you gaze over the precipice.
Well, yeah. I wrote some words for the website. I'll just mention that in passing. I haven't sent it yet. I haven't sent it to you yet, but
if you need me to help with that, just let me know.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's written. I just haven't sent it yet.
Okay.
What was I gonna say? Well, I'm sorry, y'all, because if I'm just not making sense. I'm over ambitious. I try to explain stuff that's actually not really within my explanatory reach.
I mean, I was following you. Chad is just being ornery. I usually can follow you most of the time. Like
that's cool.
Like I get you.
That's cool. I also like to think I'm kind of easier to understand now than I was before, but I don't necessarily know.
You're easier to understand since what?
I think I'm easier to understand these days than I used to be, because I think I've thought about things more and kind of clarified them. But
you were like always talking about the CTMU and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Was, like I felt like you explained that to me in a way that I could understand. Like I've watched some videos of I can't.
Well, probably the CTMU that can be explained is not the CTMU. Chris Langan will always say you didn't explain it correctly, but that's totally fine, because I personally love without saying that I agree without saying that I share all his opinions. I love the philosophical work of Chris Langan. I think it's fascinating, and I also think that he's going to get big in the way that Nietzsche got big, but like Nietzsche said, some are born posthumously.
Yeah.
And Nietzsche said, I am born posthumously. I am a destiny. And Carl Jung said that, and I'm getting all this more or less from Peterson. I don't think he made this exact connection though, but Carl Jung said that whatever a man does not understand consciously, he sort of embodies it subconsciously, and he's forced to act it out, and it becomes his fate. So what Nietzsche meant when he said that he's a destiny, it's because he's not understood in his time. So his time has to act him out, and he must become their fate. And so I think that there's a way that I think that Langan is born posthumously, and I think that he's a destiny. That doesn't mean that I think that all of his ideas are super ultimately true and correct in the way that he himself thinks they are. But it's true enough that it's actually he's on the cutting edge of the zeitgeist, and that's where I'm thinking he's gonna get big in academia, but probably not in his lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see, because those super smart people, like I seen them in the nursing home, like they keep their wits for a very long time. That nervous system is so, like the Titanic, it had compartments, it was redundant and it couldn't sink. Those nervous systems have so many connections. Those brains have so many connections that it's like redundancy, and they don't die.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the mind is the last thing that goes in those super smart people, because I've seen some of them. And so Langan is like 70 now, but he could live a long time.
There's some people I've seen this happen where that aspect of their mind stays intact while other aspects will deteriorate. Like they'll forget people's names. They'll forget, they won't have memories. Like memories will kind of fade and go away of things that happen in their life. But if you get them talking on a certain subject, or even more commonly, I think, like if you sing with them songs that they know, like they'll remember all the lyrics and all the song. But yeah,
no, that I feel like that part of my mind is already going / gone. I already have. I used to say in college that I have juvenile dementia.
Yeah, what?
Juvenile dementia. Because I'm just like extremely like absent-minded in certain ways. Like I will go to a store and just totally get lost in the store, because I like, especially spatial memory. Like I can't.
Oh, really?
I can't remember or represent. Yeah, I'm sure you don't have that problem at all. I'm sure
I have like
visual spatial memories.
I'm very visual spatial. Like even when I'm describing the Trinity, I'm describing it in like 3D space, where you do it with like logical structures.
Yeah, and the weird thing about that is how much of it is just unconscious, and it's like sort of unconsciously recalling definitions. A good test of how sort of automatic or overlearned or unconscious a process is whether you can do it when you're drunk. And when I was younger, I had a high tolerance for alcohol for no reason. Like even if I wasn't drinking regularly, I could drink a really scary amount. But even then, like I would be seemingly lucid and articulate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's showing the extent to which, like this kind of unspooling of definitions is like it's really kind of overlearned and unconscious, and so like you try to think about the part of you that is sort of effortfully putting words together. It's like it doesn't exist. Like, and so who am I when I'm just kind of in this conversing mode? It's kind of weird how mindless it can be. Unless, like, Luke talks about getting ahead of his head. If in that process you're identifying with what you don't yet know, Benjamin is saying,
right. Luke's always identifying with what he can't articulate. And then when he does articulate stuff, and then people are like, that's who you are. He's like, no, that's just what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Have you ever heard of
like even like I'll get in, like even describing what I was describing about the infinite and the finite, like there's a certain groove that I've made in my mind about that I can just get in and float down.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, what I was going to ask was, did you ever hear of a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull?
Mm-mm.
No, I didn't. Nobody's heard of this book. Today I thought it was super funny because like I told my friend, like, I can't imagine God and I don't think God is real because I have frog in the well syndrome, which is, do you know the frog in the well story?
No.
You don't even know that story. Okay, so I had to, and my friend, I thought all of us knew this, but maybe because I'm raised Hare Krishna, And
Maybe.
Hare Krishnas, we have this weird other culture, and like because the one guru guy said it, like everybody knows it, but it might not be common knowledge to like the wider culture.
Right.
And even at like age 34, I'm still trying to figure out like what was common knowledge to Hare Krishnas versus what was actually part of the wider culture.
Yeah.
And so like it's the frog in the well, and he's down there in his well, and I said, and one day, let's say a seagull flies in, but not Jonathan Livingston Seagull, because he is a New Age heretic, and I thought I was so funny for saying that. But nobody knows who/what Jonathan Livingston Seagull is.
No.
But it's like this very New Age like novella about like a seagull that discovers that he's everything and like reaches nirvana kind of
Yeah.
and it's kind of like upsetting the apple cart of religion.
Among the seagull community.
For those who are blind to allegory, yes, exclusively. And so the frog in the well, he said, the seagull says, yeah, your water in here is pretty spacious, but have you ever seen the ocean? And the frog in the well is like, well, the ocean, what's that? And the seagull's like, it's this really big thing. And so the frog says, well, surely it's not this big. And he puffs himself up a little bit. And the seagull said, no, it's bigger. And then frog in the well, puffs himself up more.
Uh-huh.
And eventually poetic justice, God's judgment, etc. He probably dies, if I remember the story correctly. Right? He pops. And it's just this weird thing where like because you relativize everything to yourself,
yeah,
it's like you implicitly take yourself to be the divinity principle because you don't really know God yet. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, hold on.
right.
You don't really know God yet. So you just like relativize everything to yourself, and you implicitly sort of divinize yourself and make yourself the ultimate explanatory principle in terms of which all other phenomena are understood. And I just totally do that. Like,
Yeah.
I totally do that. But no, so I was reading about Jonathan Livingston Seagull on Wikipedia, and then I listened to like John MacArthur's take on Jonathan Livingston Seagull and how it's the devil. I made another extremely funny joke to Luke that it's too inside baseball for me to unpack it here, but the point is that I'm extremely funny. Yeah, but there's something so interesting to me about all this, because like if you take the idea that that God is infinite, then it's like in some way he doesn't have a negation. And so if you have like this concept of God like John MacArthur has, I think it's fine as long as it truly is his own highest idea of the infinite. If it's his own highest idea of the infinite, then there's, someone can be like in sort of maximal accord or alignment with their own highest ideal. And that ideal can nonetheless to you present certain flaws, because there's something that you know about God that other person doesn't know as well. But nonetheless, like they're really right with their own concept of God. But if someone if they don't even really think God is a certain way, but they're just pretending to believe in a certain concept of God just so that they can keep their role as a pastor or whatever, then that's when the internal kind of tension of God's judgment starts, which is God's judgment is like a passive thing. You just kind of let someone suffer the intrinsic consequences of their sin, because sin isn't bad just because God is choosing to punish you for it, but otherwise it would be endless fun. He's calling it bad because it's something that by its nature is harmful. No, I don't read anyone. That's the shortest. I do not read anyone. I have severe ADD. I don't read anybody. If it sounds like I've read somebody, I haven't read them. But I'm not saying they're not smart or interesting or worth reading. They probably are, but I have very severe ADD. what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so MacArthur's God, that is like totally and finally excluding Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's like Jonathan Livingston Seagull is this abomination that is like irredeemable in principle, and as long as that exists, it's like, I don't know, like it has to be subject to the most like absolute and unconditional form of negation, because its existence is like so incompatible with the existence of God. And it's like, because it's almost here like God has a negation or an opposite, but it's too limited. But at the same time, the way the sort of like, at least our experience of the kind of unfolding of God's identity, I really might have to go play with my son soon
I gotta
because
go.
he
In
doesn't know why I'm not.
I gotta go in 3 minutes.
Man. Okay. Well, at least the way that we experience the sort of like God's sort of self unpacking of his identity, it looks like a process of a self-resolving paradox. It looks like a something where the infinite is sort of redefining itself constantly.
Yeah.
And so that so there's a certain way where where God sort of he is finite in the sense of becoming subject to a limit, but then in the next moment, being seen always to have been like already beyond the limit. So it's not totally wrong to say. I'm not saying it's wrong to say there can be this interplay of the infinite and the finite. But like when you hear like this kind of very narrow God that someone is talking about, you just know it's wrong because whatever is limited in that way, it can't be God. And so you cast your own mind to your own highest conception of God, but then in the next moment you see that it's not sufficient either, because the Tao that can be named, it's not the eternal Tao kind of thing.
Yeah.
But because God is actually infinite, let's say, there can always be this endless life of coming to know Him, which was what led me to say in a earlier recording, like earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, I speculated that that creation sort of exists because it is God's own. What did I say? It is God is unable to know Himself because He's infinite. Because He's truly X and not X. He's not able to know Himself, and this creation and its infinite and varied splendor is sort of the self unknowing of God. Which is this. I guess it's a stoner thought that I keep having that is very compelling to me. But it's still just the way it's
divided God. Jung divided God. Well, at least in the book I'm reading, he divided God between God, so Yahweh, in his temporality, interacting with people, and Jung characterized him as like angry and violent and jealous and loving and all these sort of qualities. But then he also says that there's God in his omniscience, and he regularly says something like God didn't consult his omniscience or else he would have known this, and because of that he does this or that or whatever, until Jung is psychologizing God. But he has to divide God up into these two characters. One is God is in his omniscience, that knows what's going to happen and the reasons for things, and then God in his, which he would say would be the God idea or the collective unconscious.
I vibe with this. According to a Wikipedia page I read, certain Kabbalists said that God he took away his own omniscience so that humans could have free will. That's sort of like, again, like the sort of self-emptying or self-negation of the tzimtzum kind of
Yeah,
idea, where
you get
God
that weird,
withdraws
like,
himself.
does this get into like it's like a not progressive, it's where God can change or whatever, the
Yeah, it's like process theism.
process. Yeah.
And yeah, the thing is, I think that like process theism and classical theism are like both true, but from certain perspectives. So like
Yeah.
process theism is what's true in the moment. It's like what's existentially describing, like, or phenomenologically describing your experience. But classical theism is true after the fact, because causation is necessitation. Like, in order for something to definitely be X or not X, there has to be something that necessitates that, and something that necessitates what necessitates that, and on and on, back and back. And it seemed to be logically necessary from the end to the beginning. And so, like, from that perspective, from that final perspective, it's like you would turn back and look and see that whatever has happened, it had to happen. But in the moment, it's if there is freedom, then that is not the case. So it's like, to me, it's like it's a prospective and a retrospective perspective. It's like the classical.
Well, it's like I chose to marry my wife, but looking back on it, there was no choice. Like, it just had to happen. Like,
exactly. Like they say, like, predestination is like the door that on the top of it says whosoever will may come, but when you walk through it and turn around, it says predestined from all eternity on the other side of the door. Like, that's the way it works, because like the present moment is undetermined, but like when it's over, you see that it always had to be what it was, but it's genuinely undetermined now. The superposition that when it collapses is seen in retrospect never to have been a superposition.
Right.
But it's still like a real superposition, at least according to the, I don't know, like the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics or whatever, right? Because like the indeterminacy is supposedly real.
All right,
anyway.
I gotta go.
See, I said I invoked quantum physics. That makes me right. Okay, guys, I definitely know what I'm talking about.
See you.
All right,
See
we'll
you,
sign off.
Sir Cal.
See you next year. How clever.
Happy New Year, everyone. I should end the stream before I leave. I could filibuster right now. Maybe I could just keep talking and talking. But I gotta go. I gotta go get lunch. So Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Phoebus. John, I don't know you. Thank you for joining. Luke. That was me making a comment on behalf of Luke. Luke, thank you for starting the stream. Grail Country, thank you for everything. Nate. Let's see, anyone I'm missing here. Oh, I saw Hezi was making comments there early on. It was before I joined. Or no, it was after I joined, but oh well. All right. Hope you guys have a blessed New Year and hope you understand the Trinity. Bye.